you and for those who come after you. And so number one is, how do I know what to do with my life? And God has instilled in every single one of us 4 things. There's lots of things, whether it's a hobby, just things you enjoy doing. You like going outside, these different things that you enjoy doing. God gives you those things for reasons. God gives us the desires of our heart. Amen? So he has given you those things, and they're not for nothing. They're not to just, blow your Sunday afternoon after church or something on. There's something that you can really do something big and genuine with your life. And so I would say the first step is to kind of pursue, that path that God has for you, is to pursue your talents, gifts, and interests. He gave you those for a reason. God doesn't give things, this is just something for them to do when they're bored, when they don't have anything to do. No, they're intentional. God is very intentional with the things that he gives us. He doesn't give people interest willy-nilly. He's like, oh, well, they look like they might like the Rubik's Cube. I'll just make them really good at it for no reason at all. That doesn't do that. My brother does the Rubik's Cube, and that's been a way for him to connect with people, to bring people close to him, to even be an outreach for Jesus at certain points in time. And that's just, it's not something you would expect. I would never expect that, for God to use something like that. But that's how intentional he is with things like that. He gives you all these things, there's a greater purpose to it. And so we need to acknowledge that they are God-given and they have a purpose. And they're not only God-given, but they're blessed by God. So when you do those things that you enjoy doing, they are blessed. And they are going to be impactful to those around you. And so kind of pulling from my own story, I see this in my life a lot. So when I was probably, I would say like 13 or so, that can help me out, we started doing video announcements at our church. We haven't done them in a while because they are a lot of work. They're very interesting, and it's a certain point where it's probably just a little more practical to have someone come up and, just tell you the announcements. But we did them for a while, but that's kind of how I got my start. I kind of realized, hey, I kind of like, making videos, being behind the camera and stuff like that. So who knows how long ago that was. But that's something that I just kind of decided that I was interested in. I was into that. And so I decided to pursue that. So I started helping out with that. When I was of college age, I, took a video class at college. Just decided to pursue it because I enjoy it. What's it going to hurt? I want to, pursue the things that I enjoy. And, that turned into, shooting my own videos, helping out here in the church. And when I eventually moved out and went to Bible college, I got a video job at a church up in Springs. And that really, just looking back on that has skyrocketed just my career, my personal, it's just pretty much every aspect of my life just pretty much rockets off from that point. From that, I learned how to be part of, video teams. I learned how to do really good audio, and I would just watch YouTube videos, because I just wanted to learn more and more and more. And now I'm at a pretty good job. I work at Dr. James Dobson Family Institute in Springs, and I'm at a video editor there, and I just look back, and in the beginning, before I, kind of knew that I liked video editing, I didn't know anything. But from that point, that has elevated me to be able to provide for my wife, not to mention meeting my wife at that church. So that, just a little nice thing that came out of that. But that's a pretty good deal if I do say so myself. But, I look back and just from those little moments of just pursuing those interests, and, it doesn't seem like a lot. You're like, well, I might have nothing better to do. I guess I'll learn a little bit more about this. But those are the building blocks that I feel that almost my entire life is built on, and that God allowed that to really propel me forward, that I probably would have never been able to have that opportunity if it wasn't for that. And so I'd encourage you all, no matter how small or insignificant that your hobbies or interests or whatever they might be, God can do great and mighty things with little. He multiplied the loaves and the fish. He can do great things with just your interests and hobbies. He did that with Samson. Samson had a gift. He used it for the Lord. We won't talk about the last part of the Samson story, but the beginning was really good. He used God's gifts for good. Solomon, God gave him wisdom. He used them for good. Same, not so much in the end, but in the beginning it was really good. And David, with him just being out in the fields and just, the little things with his slingshot, just slaying a lion here, a bear here. It seems like little things, but God elevated him to the king of Israel. That's crazy. God can do so much with so little. God will give you the desires of your heart. So those things that you desire, God will give them to you. They're not there for nothing. Your passions and interests are inherently things that you want to desire more and more to get to know more about. God made it that way. He wants you to be excited about it. And it's only natural that, like I said, some of those interests turn into something bigger. They turn into something that God uses for the greater good. And it's amazing how he does that. And like I said with David, he's probably the biggest change-up that's ever happened in all the Bible. I mean, some 12, 13-year-old kid just, watching sheep. Hopefully there's no farmers in here, but probably back then, one of the most insignificant things you could do back then. You just sit there and do sheep, but God did so much. Killed a lion, killed a bear, killed Goliath. Like, man, it's crazy what God does. And so, really, just go after those things that God has put in your heart unabashedly, and just go after it. And so once you kind of get going with that, speak over it. Speak over your path in life. Be prophetic in your life. I'm expecting big things to happen in my life. With whatever I put my hand to, it prospers. Your words have power, and your goals in life will align with the mindset that you have. So if you have, if you say 3 years ago you had, it's COVID time, I guess my career's down the tubes. No. I can think, there's so many people who I know who had, whether it's an at-home business or just some sort of product business, they started at home during that time, and God did crazy things during that time, during probably one of the darkest times that I've been alive. It doesn't matter what's going on. God doesn't care about circumstances. Circumstances don't matter to God. And so we need to be careful of what we're speaking and believing for our life, because it changes. What you're thinking will change your mindset. So if you're thinking great and positive things over your career, your path, what God has for you, it's inevitable that it's going to align with those thoughts. So I want to read the scriptures, James chapter 3, 3 through 5. And this is kind of, the go-to that everyone has, that we all need to be aware of the power that our words have. And so in verse 3 it says, "Indeed we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things." And so really, it's important to realize the impact that your words have. And, imagine your tongue is that rudder, where it's going to take you in life. If you steer that rudder in the wrong direction, it could steer you away from where God wants you to be in your life. So we need to always be careful and cautious that we're steering back into where we know that God has good things for us. And we have to be very intentional. Again, Dad has spoken about all this. Your thoughts, they come and they go, and they're just crazy. So we have to be very intentional with what we're thinking. Speak blessings over your future. Be hopeful and thankful for what God has already given you, and know that he's going to use it for so much more in your future. It's important. And so once you have all that, and you get into that place, you're there, and you're in your dream job or whatever, do it as if you're doing it unto the Lord. It's important. It's very tempting, once you get into that spot, it's like, oh, I finally got this big thing that I've been wanting for my whole life. Now I can relax. I'll just do things to get by. No. Were you doing that before, when you're being expectant and hopeful for God to give you that great opportunity that he gave you? You need to be always doing things as if you're doing them unto the Lord. And you need to be grateful for what God has given you. So a really good example of this is Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a lot when he got dealt a really horrible hand throughout his life, mostly because of his brothers. So I'm going to go over that. And so if you didn't know, Joseph had 11 brothers. Their father loved him the most. He was the favorite. And so some of you might know that if you have lots of siblings and stuff, it's not good nowadays to have favorites. This isn't indicating that a parent should have a favorite child. This is back then. Right, Dad? Okay. Just making sure. So back then, wrongly, he had a favorite son. And And all the other brothers knew it. And as you could expect, they didn't really like that too much. I don't think any of us would. It'd be like, oh, well, don't you love me? No, I love your brother Mark. Cool. Awesome. Not something that everyone wants to hear. So, of course, you can imagine that they were not happy about it. And they're even more not happy when he told them he had a couple of dreams. And if you guys know, he dreamt about these bundles of grain and the sun and the moon and the stars bowing before someone in the middle. And they were like, oh, who's that person in the middle? And Joseph was like, it's me. Everyone's bowing to me. So they already didn't like him, and you can imagine that little tidbit didn't do too well after. And so the story goes, they got jealous. They threw him in a deep pit. They sold him into slavery. Probably wouldn't have happened if he had one or two sisters, I'm guessing. It probably wouldn't have gotten to that point, you know. They probably been like, hey, maybe let's think about this a little more. All brothers, he wasn't that lucky. They did what they were thinking, unfortunately for him. So they sold him into slavery, and most people would think, well, that's kind of it. You know, nothing can really come from that. That's his life is basically over. You know, you can't really do too much about that. But God did something with it. He was bought by a man named Potiphar, and he raised him up in his house, and he pretty much became Potiphar's right-hand man. He was a very influential man. And so that was a big deal. And then even further, Potiphar's wife tried to make advances toward him, but Joseph was not having it. So he ran away. Potiphar's wife lied about him, said he tried to make advances at her, so Potiphar sent him to prison. And if you didn't think it was bleak at this point, most people would say, well, this is as bleak as it can get. You know, now there's really no hope. But even still, it didn't matter how deep Joseph got. God was still moving in his life and working things, and he had plans for him, no matter what. And so while he was in that prison, there's some men there, and they were having these dreams, and he interpreted them. And this one he interpreted, he became the Pharaoh's right-hand man, or was it his cook, or the cupbearer, I believe. One of those. I should have prepared that. But he became, but he basically interpreted that, and he was like, Pharaoh, this guy interpreted my dream while we were in prison. And Pharaoh had a dream that he was woeful about, so he was looking for people to interpret this dream. So Joseph was able to go all the way up to the Pharaoh, the man who had fallen into slavery, and then somehow from slavery into jail, even worse, all the way up to a meeting with the Pharaoh. And when he interpreted the dream, Pharaoh made him the right-hand man over all of Egypt. So when you look at that story from beginning to end, it doesn't look very good in the beginning. But all through that, God was working, and God had a plan all through that. And the big thing about all of that is Joseph didn't let any of that get to them. At every point of his life and of that journey, he did his work as if he was doing it unto the Lord. He never let situations or circumstances get the better of him. He never let his thoughts or expectations on his life drift into the negative. He was always hopeful, and he always knew that God was working out something for his good. And boy, did God work out something for his good. From quite literally the lowest point you could possibly be in life to pretty much the highest next to being Pharaoh that he could have been. Those are very two different places to be in life. And so that should tell you that God is no respecter of persons. He does not care about circumstances. He is working in your life. And how Joseph acted all throughout that is how we need to act. We need to do everything. It doesn't matter, you know, if the boss at work is being a slave driver. It doesn't matter how things are going. If things are tough, finances are tough. Do your work as if you're doing it unto the Lord. He blesses those who are faithful. And God promotes those who are faithful. God sees. God doesn't let, you know, extra deeds and the extra work that you're putting in go by. He sees all of that. And so it would have been easy for Joseph to lose faith in God or to lose hope in himself. I probably would have lost hope in myself. That's bleak. You're just like, man, what can I do right? I'm being a good man. I was being a good man